Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience for the delayed start. So I'm Katrin Ramsey, and these are second year orthopedic students of mine. I teach orthopedics, but they're second year doctoral students. And they're going to introduce themselves, and they've done a wonderful job. This is the next generation of caretakers that I have complete faith in. That's going to take care of me in my old age and all the rest of you. So without further ado, I'll let them share their expertise.
Good evening, everybody. First, we would like to say thank you to Troy for having us here. We're very excited to share our presentation and our information with you here tonight. As I said, we are second year Doctor of Physical Therapy students at Russell Sage here in Troy, New York. My name is Genevieve Brights.
My name is Jacob Tambolini.
I'm Olivia Ciampito. Emily Bablin. Kat Sacro. Jordan Reifenberg. Elena Mosites.
Alex Fulham.
Dalton Salamito.
Olivia Juno. Claire Basilla. Rebecca Rowe. Emma Crawleys. And as we discussed, we are going to be sharing with you some information on the benefits of nature exposure for health promotion and wellness. All right, so nature exposure is a huge common theme among many researchers, and they have many claims about how it's beneficial for your overall health. But how exactly does it do this? Well, today my peers and I will be explaining to you the immense benefits that being outside in nature can have for you, including mental and psychological health, such as your emotions, your feelings, and your overall mental well-being, as well as physical health, including your cardiovascular status, immune function, and your sleeping habits. There are many ways that you can be exposed to nature, but the most prominent one we think of is being outside in nature. But how much time do you really spend outside? Well, we were pretty curious about that as well, and one of our studies showed that on average, adolescents spend 50 minutes outside on nature during weekdays and 61 minutes on weekends. But by a show of hands, does anybody here feel like they fall within those time frames? Anybody feel like weekdays, 50 minutes outside, 61 minutes on the weekends? Okay, so a few. Well, we hope that for the rest of you, this presentation will be a great way to show the benefits that nature can have and some easy ways for you guys to increase your nature exposure.
All right, so we wanted to start off with a couple of concepts surrounding nature exposure. So before reading the slides, does anyone want to take a stab at passive nature exposure means?
Looking outside, looking out a window.
Yeah, pretty darn close. So passive exposure to nature is like where you live and like how close in proximity you are to nature on a day-to-day basis. I won't make you guys tell me the active nature exposure definition, but active nature exposure is going out of your way to go expose yourself to nature. So going on a hike, walking on the beach, and stuff like that. But both have great effects on mental well-being, sleep, and physical activity. Another concept we have in nature exposure is this idea of green space versus blue space. Green space is what you think of the color green, so trees, grass, and other types of vegetation. And then blue space is lakes, rivers, ponds, and places like the ocean. And immersing yourself in both green or blue spaces can help improve mental well-being, body appreciation, sleep, and help facilitate physical activity. So it helps you be more active and be outside more than those 50 minutes or 61 minutes.
All right, another thing we're going to talk about is Shinrin Yoku. Has anybody here heard of Shinrin Yoku at all?
But it had a special Japanese name.
Okay, yeah.
Saw the note that said forest bathing on it.
Yes, yeah, so it's also known as forest bathing. And what it is, so it was established by the Japanese government in the 1980s. And it was used as a way for citizens living in urban environments as a way to reduce stress. And so there are two main types of Shinrin Yoku. There is static and dynamic. So static is just you're being still. And to back up a little bit, so exactly what it is full immersion in nature using all 5 of your senses. So you're not on your phone or anything, you're just completely in nature. And so like I said, static, that is you're just still. So this could be, you know, you're sitting in a park, you're taking everything in. And then dynamic, this is moving. So this could be going on that hike, going for a walk, doing yoga. So just really completely being in nature and taking it all in with all your senses. Next, I'm gonna be talking about the physical effects of nature exposure, or in other words, what spending time in nature can do for our bodies. So research has shown that spending time in a forest environment, or specifically forest bathing, can have positive impacts on heart rate variability. So has anybody heard of heart rate variability before? So heart rate variability, it's a measure of how adaptable your body is to change or stress. So if you have good heart rate variability, that would indicate that your heart is more resilient and you have overall good cardiovascular fitness. And then some other effects are it can decrease levels of cortisol, which is the primary stress hormone in our body. And then it can also lower blood pressure, which decreases the risk of hypertension, or in other words, high blood pressure.
All right, so we're gonna go back to talking a little bit about what Alex was talking about earlier with passive and active, as well as green and blue spaces. So first of all, who's had issues sleeping in the past? Whatever, yeah, a lot of people, There's lots of things that impact our sleep, right? Stress, what we ate that day, what's going on in our lives, ruminating thoughts, things like that. So we did a little bit of research about nature exposure and how that affects your sleep. So it is found that both passively and actively going into nature, so either just being in nature or going into nature to hike and swim and bike and, do whatever else, really did benefit sleep. And then also green and blue spaces, so going into a forest versus going to the coast and walking along the ocean, both have very positive effects on your sleep. So found that streetscape greenery, so kind of what you see outside when you go out on the street, and blue view from home led to higher mental well-being, which then led to lower rates of insufficient sleep. So overall, people got better sleep. And then as far as going out into nature, further than just what you live around, traveling to nature, visiting green and blue spaces were associated with higher mental well-being, as well as better physical activity, which then in turn led to better sleep. So how many of you feel like maybe some time in nature might convince you to get a little bit better sleep? Yeah, maybe a little bit, yeah, okay, good.
So the next one is about cardiovascular illness and immune system. So with a raise of hands here, how many people have a friend, family member with some form of cardiovascular illness? That's about, for the people that can't see, it's about 80% of the people in here. So as a population in America, we know that cardiovascular disease is a very big thing in America. A lot of people struggle with it. So one thing that nature exposure helps with is lowering that risk of cardiovascular disease. And the way that it does that, what do people normally do when they go in the parks? Anyone want to take a stab at it? Yeah, I guess you could say sit, but exercise, they walk, walking, ambulating, getting in that fresh air really helps you lower that risk of cardiovascular disease. And then another thing is the immune system. So you wouldn't think that just being in nature would really help your immune system. It's not something you think of on a daily basis. But what was seen was with forest bathing and waterfall exposure. So waterfall exposure is just being in the presence of a waterfall, breathing in those natural water molecules and particles from it. It helps increase the efficiency of your immune system and those cells that it produces. And in turn, this decreases the chance of damaged DNA cells that can turn into cancer. So the immune system produces certain cells that can help rid the body of these cells, help protect you from cancer in the future. And then another thing it does is increase the recovery from illness. So a lot of us struggle with seasonal flu, seasonal cold. Being in nature can really help that. And then lastly, how many people here struggle with seasonal allergies or have asthma? It's about 50%. So another thing nature does is help lower those symptoms, being able to breathe in those natural particles that really cause you to have those asthma attacks and seasonal allergies. Getting your immune system used to it can really help to diminish the symptoms that are brought on with it.
Okay, so in addition to some of the physiological benefits that we just went over, so like what happens to your body, we also have psychological benefits to nature exposure. So psychology is the study of how your brain will produce like your feelings and then in turn your mood. So mood is just like a set of your feelings that can change. So some of the things that we found were adolescence improved, so nature exposure in adolescence. There was improved depression, anger, fatigue, mood disturbances, and overall mood. And then as far as college students, there was improved confusion, tension, and vigor. And then workplaces, so spending some time in nature, having like plants in the workplace.
that improved happiness, confidence, energy, mood, sensory pleasantness, and restoredness. So again, by a show of hands, has anyone like felt like from their time starting, like going outside, did that help your mood in any way? Yeah. Would anyone like to share a time that their mood like drastically changed? Yeah.
Well, during COVID, when we couldn't go anywhere, I'm like, I'm just gonna really get into the gardening. And I looked at YouTubes on how to do this and how to do that, and I had a blast.
Yeah,
But I couldn't
yeah,
go
that's
anywhere.
great.
And yeah, I think of that as one of my most happy times.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. That's a perfect example, gardening. Yeah, so how this like actually works is when we go outside or any of our behaviors do allow chemical signals in our bodies to be released called hormones, and then we have these feel-good hormones that get released, and that creates a better mood for us.
Okay, so as Becca just mentioned, nature exposure can have tremendous benefits for your overall mood and psychological health. So I want to talk specifically about the role of nature exposure on mental health and mental illness. And mental health is important because it's what allows you to cope with the stresses of everyday life. So the research that I looked at nature exposure in childhood and how it can affect your mental health in later life. So by a show of hands, how many people feel like they spent a significant amount of time outside as a child? And how many people feel that children nowadays spend the same amount of time outside? Yeah. Yeah, kids are spending a lot more time on technology now, so looking at this, you can tell kiddos in your life to spend some more time outside in nature, because the research has shown that it can positively improve mental health, specifically reducing anxiety, depression, even ADHD and OCD, reducing behavioral issues, and improving overall senses of well-being and happiness.
Okay, so now we're gonna switch our topic a little bit. So we're gonna talk about nature effect on attention, which is beneficial for learning and productivity. So there's two different types of attention. There is voluntary and involuntary. So voluntary attention is the type of attention that you're putting effort into, and it takes a lot of mental resources. So like if you sit down to like read a book or like do some work, you're using your voluntary attention to focus. With involuntary attention, it is not using any resources and it's automatic. So an extreme example of this is if a bear were to walk through the door, everybody would turn and look and you wouldn't think about what you're doing. So it's involuntary, it just automatically grabs your attention. So with these two theories, voluntary attention uses energy or resources, involuntary doesn't. So voluntary is prone to fatigue, which is why a lot of times when you're sitting down and you're trying to do work and concentrate for a really long time, you slowly like lose focus on what you're doing. So nature has actually been found to help this and improve our attention spans. So there's two theories, the attention restoration theory and then the stress reduction theory. And the attention restoration theory says that when we're outside in nature, it automatically grabs our involuntary attention. So like something like a bird chirping or leaves falling, you automatically look to it. And when this happens, you're resting your voluntary attention. And so it's able to restore and you have more of that available to do whatever you want to do with it. And then our stress reduction theory says that being out in nature lowers, as we talked about before, the stress hormone in our body, it lowers our blood pressure, has all these good effects on us. And therefore, we're not stressed. And as we all know, being stressed takes up a lot of resources. So when those resources are available for us, we can use them for our voluntary attention.
Next, we're gonna be talking about increased productivity with nature exposure. So just out of show of hands, how many people can recall being in a classroom or being in your work office or some sort of workspace with limited nature exposure and kind of slowly feeling yourself slip away kind of into.
All right, yeah, not. Spring the night light.
I'm sure they're absolutely focused with you.
Nature exposure has been shown to increase working memory, attention, as previously discussed, as well as cognitive function. Specifically in school-based settings, it has been shown in young adolescents, college students, and other diverse settings that it can increase their ability to focus and grab their attention a lot easier, so they're not fatiguing out as quickly. And then additionally, there was another study where it worked on VR exposure, comparing a environment that had no plant life, typical basic office setup, and then an environment that had just pretty limited plant exposure and then some sense stimulations for some nature sense. That showed to increase working memory, decrease that inhibition, as well as increase fascination in their work, coherence, and compatibility with their workspace, as well as facilitating their feeling of being enriched and not feeling as closed off or limited in their work environment.
So my study looked at a group of 700 people and they observed them for about 2 years. And over the course of a week, they found that people were they spent twice as much time on their phones as they did compared to the amount of time that they did in nature. I thought this was interesting because that caused me to reflect on the amount of time I was spending on my phone and in nature, and definitely felt about compatible to what I do. My question to all of you is, how many of you feel like you spend maybe equal amounts of time as you do in nature compared to on your phone?
That's neither.
What if I use my phone in the park?
That's my second question. When you're outside, are taking in nature or on your phone and not taking in nature maybe at its fullest. Also guilty of that. They found that when people were in areas like parks, for less than 2 hours, they found that people were using their phones, taking phone calls, scrolling on social media. When people were in parks for longer than 2 hours, though, they found that smartphone activities actually decreased. Same as when they were in nature areas such as meadows, forests, that kind of thing. So I think that is something to think about the next time you're in nature and maybe scrolling on your phone, maybe get off your phone, focus on your surroundings, and yeah.
So did you know that 20 to 40% of women and 50% of men, at some point in their life have body dissatisfaction? So spending time in nature can help improve that, as well as your self-perceived physical attractiveness and functionality appreciation. Does anyone want to take a stab at what functionality appreciation is? That's okay, I didn't know either. So what this is honoring and respecting your body for what it is capable of doing. So even though that, like, for us might look different from someone else, it's just spending time and reflecting and appreciating your body for what it is capable of doing. Just to piggyback off of Liv's, the second study that I looked at found that specifically in adolescents, their increased time on social network platforms and specifically Facebook also decreased their body satisfaction. So just again, trying to get kids to put their phones down and spend more time outdoors.
So before you move on, why?
I think it's just honestly people like, I know when I spend more time in nature, I compare myself less, I guess. When we're in like society, we tend to look at other people and kind of like be like, oh, like maybe I look different from them. But when we're in nature and you fully immerse yourself in nature, you're just taking in all the beautiful stuff around you, and that kind of makes you be yourself for who you are, and kind of again appreciate how like the genes that you have and what your body is capable of doing, and not compare it to other people.
I'll just chime in, can't help it. So there is this theory called the biophilia theory, which is we evolved in nature, right? And so we have this affinity and attraction for nature. And when you go into nature, we're going back into ancestors and old DNA and the experience of being captivated by nature and coexisting with nature. So I think that might have something to do with it too.
That's interesting.
Would that, when you're in the nature, would you play music, would that help everybody or just
I
compared to
didn't,
using the phone?
yeah, I didn't find anything, but if you really enjoy nature, art and music. I don't see why you can't combine them both.
So the next thing that we'll talk about is IVE, which is immersive virtual environments. So what this is, it's the use of technology, which are VR headsets, virtual reality. It's a 360 model with headphones and that VR headset, but you're able to immerse yourself completely into an environment of your choice. And then you are able to actually like move without that in an environment. So within the study, it was shown to have impact on brain activity and stress. So there was an increase in parietal lobe function. So the parietal lobe, that's an area in our brain where we have our sensory information that's processed, and it also helps us, let us know where our body is in space. So, and with decreased overall stress as well, which shows, I'm sorry, Jenny. It showed a decrease in overall stress, and with both of these, the individuals were seeing rainforest environments specifically, which goes along with our nature. So the importance of this was using modern technology. Also, it's helpful in immersing yourself in nature and benefits overall brain function. So with the with the availability for this, it's very expensive. So there's possibilities of having this as an option, and through your health professionals, like in hospitals, potentially they'll have them. And educational facilities, you can have it, or even for purchase. So with this stuff, it's very good for individuals who maybe can't get outside, can't walk around, who are like, bedridden and can't really get out to see that nature. With all of this said, it can be expensive. It's, you don't really need all of this technology to actually get out in the environment and still be able to see it. So it is an option, but it's, very expensive, so it's not necessarily the best option to use, but it is fun if you're able to have access to that.
So can anybody tell me any obstacles you may have? Can you think of any obstacles that keep you from being able to get out into nature?
When you work at night, it's
Okay,
tough.
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
We work nights, so it's tough for us to, unless
Absolutely.
the weekend work.
Okay. Anybody else?
Physical conditions.
Okay, absolutely. Yep. So what can you do? My peers and I came together and we came up with a list of some easy ways that we can help you get more exposure to nature. So the first one we had was 15 minutes of nature, and we thought about this through walking. But we don't want it to feel like a chore for you. We don't want it to feel like, oh, now I gotta go on my nature walk, like anything like that, because that doesn't do anything for your mood either. That doesn't help. So we want you to make it fun. We want to make you something that you think is enjoyable. So you can listen to music, or maybe you grab a friend or a family member, or you get a group together and you go on nature walks. Or maybe you're gonna grab that little four-legged friend at home and take an adventure with them for 15 minutes, because they're probably like, get me out of here. I want to go see something. I want to go outside. Another one that we have is plants in your office and your workspace, because this is a great way for you to add some greenery, add some beauty into your day. You're still seeing nature and you're being exposed to it, but you're spending a lot of time at work. So maybe you add something in. But who here by show of hands is a terrible plant parent? No matter what you do, they die and you can't keep them alive. And you manage to kill the ones that they said are unkillable. That's me too. I've had at least 6 and they're like, you can't kill this one, and I did it, so I'm like, okay. Well, we have some options for you too. You can add in pictures or posters of nature in your space. These can be scenes that you've taken yourself. So some pictures at the beach, maybe when you went out for a walk in the forest, you can have them printed and put them up. Or maybe you see a poster out in the store and you're like, that's beautiful, that's nature, I'd like to put that up as well. Another one would be gardening and planting as a hobby, as you said. You're gonna get the benefit of being outside, but you're also gonna have that green thumb, and you're gonna have these beautiful flowers or this fresh produce that you grew yourself, and you were outside in nature during all of it, so you're getting double benefits for it. And another one we had was maybe you take up an outside sport or have sport. Maybe you take up a weekly outdoor sport and you get your friends and your family together and you just have some fun with that.
I saw hands, how many people are pretty local here, like within 30 minutes? You want? Okay, excellent. Is it for you? I compiled together a list of 4 different parks around this area, all within 30 minutes of walking distance from this location. One is Prospect Park over in Troy, it's off of Congress Street. Clover Island, which is right across the bridge in Cahones, actually. Little Park is off of Hoosick Street in Troy. And then, Knickerbocker Park off of Seventh Avenue, right down the road. And then, actually on the way here, we passed Powers Park, which I missed in my Google search. I guess Google doesn't know everything. But the main idea is there is nature all around you. It's very close that you may not notice until you drive by one day or you walk by. So we just wanted to give you some options of places that were close and accessible by walking, by biking, and just nearby to everyone.
So from this presentation, we really hope you guys learn the importance of nature exposure and some easy ways to get nature exposure. So today we would like to leave you with this quote that Alex found. And it said, "It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see," by Henry David, last name I don't know how to say.
I can't see from.
So every day we pass by nature in ways that you don't expect. When you're walking to work, maybe you see a park on your way there, but we don't always take time to appreciate what you're seeing. So we hope that this serves as a reminder for you guys to take some time and appreciate what you're seeing and to appreciate all the benefits that nature can have with you. Today, as a closing note, we wanted to leave you all with your own little taste of nature exposures through some photos. We compiled a list of all of our pets out in nature for you today. And we would like to thank you guys so much for having us today and open the floor for any questions or anything from you guys.
So you talked about blue space and green space and all the benefits they can have. Do they have different types of benefits?
The study that I looked at mostly talked specifically about whether you were traveling to nature, so that active of like going into nature versus just about where you lived. There is more benefits found between the differences between those rather than just green or blue spaces, but both green and blue spaces are found to have benefits. So kind of whatever is accessible to you, you know, or whatever you personally enjoy. If you can get yourself to go on a hike around a lake more often than you can get yourself to go hike up a mountain, great. You know, whatever is more beneficial to you that will get you to be able to go do that, I think is the best option. There wasn't really anything specifically found that said that like, oh, like the ocean was better than, you know, a forest or something like that.
I was wondering if it just affected our bodies in different ways. Like you need both.
Well, there is some, I mean, what she's saying is correct, so it's not green or blue. There is a lot of research that shows what you experienced as a child or and younger in life that spoke to you is going to be more meaningful to you and more effective as a nature exposure as an adult. And there's also the concept of just a little bit of nature, like an urban park is not as beneficial as a big, huge beach, right? So the amount of time you spend, the amount of nature in location, less urban, more rural. And then again, whatever it was when you were younger that you loved is what's gonna make you feel better when you're older.
Would that be considered winter time that, you know, when you go out to snow and some people they make it like feel depressed every winter time and can't go out and then going out is like old school. You know what I mean? Like it would that consider also help your body or
Who asked that question the other day? Who were
somebody
we
in class
class? The other day, weren't we?
White and gray space, what about that?
Yeah, right.
Baby and snow.
Yeah, there in Norway or in, you know, Scandinavian countries, children are outside all the time. And those children, from what we just learned, are probably gonna do very well in life with mental and physical health.
Plus the ticks aren't out there.
That's right.
I personally like the winter time because my allergies are less, so I enjoy the nature because of that reason. So it's interesting to know that that would have an effect.
Agreed.
So I believe we were meant to live in a garden, you know, in a covered created. It's wonderful to hear you all sharing all these benefits that are really true and you're kind of proving it. But, it seems to me observing that some people have to be out in nature, like they have to have an outdoor job, or, like, my son has a friend that he's gotta do the trails, you know, he's always got that in mind, the trails, and it's, I think, hard for him to live in a box like this. So have you found that some people just need it more for their mentality and, more intensely than others, maybe?
I think it just goes back to what Dr. Ramsey said about exposure as a child and of, maybe that's something that they were exposed to more as a child that brings back positive memories to it. Or the opposite, they didn't have a lot of exposure as a child, so then they're trying to, and then like as they got older, they got more exposure outside. And then they realized this is what I want more to get big inside.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna jump off that a little bit because, I know in my line of work, one of the biggest things that is requested, is natural daylight in buildings, and that my office has a window, right? So, everybody craves it
Mhm.
to some degree, right?
Yeah, I definitely think, and to piggyback off of what Alex said and what you had asked about, people taking outdoor jobs, I think that that's probably definitely a conscious choice that they make. They're like, I enjoy being outside. I feel better when I'm outside, so I want a job that's outside. I know even from like personal experience, my brother, he was like, I cannot be inside all day, so he's a lineman, he's outside all day. And he consciously chose that. He was like, I need to have something that is outside all day. He feels better. You know, he comes home and he's still outside. So I think that maybe people are, again, predisposed from when you're younger, is you prefer to be outside versus maybe somebody who didn't have that. But yes, I do think with jobs that you choose to be outside or you are outside more, it's definitely a conscious choice, maybe even a subconscious choice of their mood and their emotions are improved when they're outside.
I heard a little bit of talk about with the water and absorbing those molecules and how that helps to fight off certain cancer cells. And I'm just wondering, I didn't hear anyone use the term talking about negative ions or anything. I'm just wondering if anyone did any kind of study on that, or if you have any information in regard to what is better or helps us to be around more of that, whether it's green space, blue space, or is there a difference? Kind of taking off of what Rachel was asking. So that's me. I think that because I have a lot of knowledge about oncology and cancer and cellular mutation, I think it's all about the parasympathetic nervous system, right? We all mostly operate in a somewhat stressed and panicked state, which taints the immune system. And so exposure to nature is going to boost the parasympathetic nervous system, not unlike yoga or meditation. I mean, there's other things that you can do, a nice massage, laying in a tub, right? There's many things that you can do to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, but I think nature exposure really targets that effectively. I can't speak to negative ion therapy or anything like that, but I do know, you know, when you're stressed, you lose white blood cells, right? They've done some interesting studies. One of my favorite studies was a woman and her husband. They've been married. Well, how long have we been married, Greg?
40 years, dear.
Okay, they've been. Good job. I forget. Let's say they were married 40 years, right? So they had the woman and they were running continuous blood gas studies on her, meaning they were keeping track of red blood cells, white blood cells. And they had her husband, you know, tiptoe into the room and do a quick little 3-minute push her button, their favorite argument. They all have them, I think. So he did the little thing and then left the room. And what they found was she lost a lot of blood cells, white blood cells, boom, just evaporated out of her system from the stress of a mock 3-minute argument with her husband, right? So I think when we encourage you to go out in nature, we're also encouraging you to physically exercise, that boosts your immune system function, and to do more self-care things, right? To go off grid, to just relax and take a breath, right? Do some relaxation or things like that. So that's what you guys want me to answer that? You dig that?
Good job, Josh.
In your cancer research and stuff, have they incorporated the VR with nature with cancer patients who are not as mobile to be able to get out?
They're starting to do that. So this is a relatively new field, and I don't know how I feel about VR. I'm like, when I started, we did a research project on this last year, like the difference between outdoor Shirin-yoku and indoor nature exposure was our research topic. Some students that we did. So they're just starting to get into it. So I don't think we have enough knowledge about it, but isn't it interesting that everything old is new again?
Yeah.
We're so disassociated from where we started at this point in our lives and in our culture. So isn't it interesting that more integrative medicine is being thought about and studied, and we are learning that it's pretty effective.
I would think that it would kind of be a similar comparison of like vitamins or the actual products that you're getting the nutrients from. Like it's better to get something than nothing, but the best is going to be the source. Would be my biased assumption.
So for those of us who work indoors, right, so I have the privilege of being outside all the time, how many plants do I need in my office? An optimal amount of plants.
Yeah, as many as you want.
It's really
As long as they don't stress you.
There's no study that exists to answer that question.
Okay.
There are some studies that show the amount of green space. The more that you have, the more the effect, right? So they've done some interesting office studies where you get like one little plant and no window, or you get a wall of plants, right? Or you get a big poster of nature, or you get a small poster of nature. So the more the merrier, it would appear in terms of effect. But again, that's in its infancy stage, that research.
Okay, interesting. And you mentioned the posters of nature when you were talking about the VR experience. I was thinking, oh, I had read somewhere that even just looking at pictures of nature can help to change your mood and change your stress level and all of that. So, you know, I kind of, because most of us don't have virtual reality, right, accessible to us. So what do you recommend with that? We just plaster our walls with it, or
Watch a video. I mean,
watch a
there's plenty
video,
of,
yeah.
access to nature videos, but then you're back on your phone, put it down.
That's right. Yeah, that's the thing, right?
That's a question. Can we use different things that stimulate the senses in different ways? So rather than just seeing, what about sound? Like the sounds of water, essential oils, which all sense of smells, like just using different, engaging different senses and just using the eyes.
Absolutely. Yep. It is a 5 sense, I mean, real nature exposure is a 5 sense experience. So in my office, I have a water fountain. Patients love it. Smells, sometimes you have to be careful with people with allergies, so that would be individual, but I agree. Whatever you can access it, however you can access it, you should access it.
So my article that had the VR exposure, they did do auditory stimulus as well as nasal stimulus. As far as the smell exposure, there was significant correlations to increased productivity as well as changes in mood with both auditory and the smell as compared to just like basic office noises and the typical, I guess, smell you would have.
So what were the sounds? What were the sounds and smells?
Sounds and smells were all customized by the individuals participating. They had a selection of a variety, like the smell of a fresh fern or nature smell as far as forest bark or something along those lines. That's what was
You know one of my favorite nature smells? Forest park. Oh, I love that smell.
Yeah.
It was a whole thing.
Yeah, your herbivores are not that. Beyond that, it gets not much.
So I was wondering if you could jump back to
Very
the heart
easy.
rate variability. You mentioned the heart rate variability and the importance of it. Is it important to have it, or is it important that your heart rate decreases, or can you just expound upon that a little bit more?
So with heart rate variability, you can have high heart rate variability or you can have low heart rate variability.
Okay.
So it was found in my study that spending time in nature causes people to have more of a high heart rate variability, which indicates that you are more resilient, your body's more resilient to the stress. And overall, again, good cardiovascular fitness, versus if someone were to have low heart rate variability, that would indicate that you're less resilient, and that could actually be a precursor to health problems in your future. So again, nature, exposure has shown that it could cause you to have a higher heart rate variability.
I would use like an example of a rubber band. So like the elasticity of a rubber band changes, if it's highly elastic, it changes a lot. So it's more useful to have, it's a better function. If the rubber band doesn't change as much, then it's not going to use as much, like cover as much paper and hold as much stuff together. So that's,
Yeah,
so
so
you
you're
want
saying
a high variability.
how fast your heart beats, or how slow it beats, or how much that changes, that's what's important. That
Precisely.
it, that it can go high or low pretty easily.
Precisely.
Yeah.
When you relax, it slows down.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to confirm, I think you said that it's more advantageous to actively, say, travel to a park than just passively be in an environment that you're using. Is that true?
That going actively into nature and traveling to nature had more of a relation to better physical activity. You increase your physical activity when you were traveling to nature, better mental well-being, which then led to better sleep benefits. So I think a lot of it has to do with the physical activity aspect of it when you're going into nature. Like if you're gonna go to a park, you're probably gonna walk around. If you're just experiencing nature around you and you live there all the time, it's almost like my relatives live up by the beach, and I'm like, don't you get like tired of the beach? Like, you know, for me, like the beach is like such an experience because I don't get to go to the beach a lot. It's almost like you don't take it in as much when you're traveling to someplace that you don't normally see in your everyday life. You kind of are gonna more likely to exercise, you're more likely to take in that space, you're more likely to, get those benefits a little bit rather than when you're just like walking down the street like you do every single day, you're not really absorbing a lot of that as much. So I think it more has to do with like the physical activity aspect of it and its benefits rather than whether you being around nature and you traveling to nature had super significant differences. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Just to spin off that, I wonder also if there is something with the anticipation
Yeah.
of going somewhere. Like I know myself when I think, oh, we're gonna go to the park, like we're gonna get together, and we're gonna go to the park and we're gonna be there. And especially if it's a place that is really beautiful, or maybe you've never been there before. So there's the excitement of seeing something new. And I'm just wondering, I would think that is also, I would think that's an endorphin like builder, just
The
the
anticipation.
yeah, the anticipation of it, and, it's an event, so I just wondered if that plays a role.
I would think so, yeah. I mean, nothing in my study specifically talked about like mood in general. I know some people looked at mood in relation to that, but yes, I would absolutely agree. Again, like I said, like traveling to some place that you've never been before or experiencing something new is definitely gonna cause a lot of those hormones to increase and give you overall benefits, especially if they're positive experiences, especially if they've connected to, your childhood and things like that bring you joy, that absolutely will have psychological effects that are beneficial.
I have one last question or thought anyway, because all of this talk, it just caused me to think, what about those that are incarcerated? Right? And just the difficulty of that in the first place. But to be rehabilitated, if you don't have this access, like, has there been any studies done? Has there been anything to suggest, maybe there's something that could help with those that are incarcerated, because to help their mental health, right, and their well-being, and to be released back into society, right? If this is so important for all of us, I mean, have there been thoughts or discussions?
Not to my knowledge, there have not been. There's been a lot of studies with patient populations. So there's some
Okay, yeah,
nursing homes, some hospitals, those populations, again, same kind of concept.
Yeah,
I'm not comparing it to incarceration, but there's been some studies on those populations. So you would think eventually there will be, right? So again, like I said, this is kind of like infancy stage. And I would expect in the next 10 to 20 years that there'll be more studies. I mean, part of the problem is financially too, when you talk about architecturally modifying a building so that it's got beautiful views and beautiful windows and you can see the clouds, right? Most of our institutional systems don't have that kind of financial stability to implement that. And even if you come over to Russell Sage, like our buildings are pretty decrepit. Right? And a lot of our buildings look out, my new office, we just moved buildings, my new office looks out on a new building.
We'll get you a poster document.
and a plant.
Interesting. You know, there is socioeconomic challenges for people even to get to a park if you can't get the right public transportation or if you have a physical disability, right? So there are factors that we need to figure out how to make this more accessible for everyone.
I have a question. You mentioned about childhood exposure to nature and how it affects your health as an adult. And you mentioned OCD. I'm curious about what aspects of OCD, how that kind of fit into the study that you looked at.
Yeah, that specific part of my research focused more on a lot of what they talked about in regards to the attention aspect of nature and the influence on attention. So the more time that you spend outside, you're able to really calm like your overall mental state and focus on what you're trying to do. So in terms of OCD, you're really able to just focus on just like relaxing, you're not stressing about like all the little things. That's the research going on. It was more related to the attention aspect.
And did I see substance use?
Substance abuse is on there as well,
Substance,
yeah.
that was, she didn't read it, but that's an important problem that we have. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So my article was a systematic review, which is looking at a bunch of articles together. So it was a combination of like 30 different articles. And I think a few different ones explored the relationship between nature exposure and substance abuse. And I didn't really like find anything specific about like how that went together, but I would assume that the overall benefits on reducing anxiety and using nature as a positive coping strategy eliminates your need for negative coping strategies like drug abuse, alcohol use, things like that.
Or with OCD, the other ways that you cope with it.
Yes.
Did you, in those other studies that you looked at, did any of them talk about like PTSD and some of the effects of nature or autism? And
no, they didn't mention any of those, but I'm not sure if there's other research out there that's looking at that, but it would be interesting to look that up.
In the back of my head, there's like, I've seen one, but I'm not that familiar with it. I have right now 1,000 studies in my head.
I was just thinking, like talking about the green space and blue space, like you see with people on the spectrum, some are drawn to water more, or grass more, or different smells or textures related to nature. So I was curious if anyone's done a study on that.
You could.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming. Did you enjoy having this in person?
Yes.
Yes, great. Shall we do this again next month in person?
Yes.
Yes, all right. So next month, on October 22nd at 6:30 p.m., we will be back here again, Joy of Troy, Seventh-day Adventist Church, 603rd Avenue, for those of you watching online, and those of you watching later in Troy, New York. And hi to all of our Facebook friends that are online right now, and those watching later. They're gonna discuss, Russell Sage is coming back.
Not these students.
Not these
I have a lot of
students. There are so many. We will miss these students because now we have a connection with them. But we're gonna see.
Come back and learn more.
Wonderful union. And the topic is gonna be sitting is the new smoking. So there will be no chairs next time, we're all gonna stand. All right, we'll have some chairs, So please, if you're watching this, come next month, October 22nd at 6:30. Everybody is here. Please come back again. Thank you so much for being here. More information. Yes. one more
So
thing.
we did make little to-go bags for you guys. They
Oh.
have a little pot and like terracotta pot and a couple of bags of seeds and a little starter thing, so you guys can start your own little garden.
Oh,
So
yay.
please take one.
So if you're watching online, come back because they bring gifts for us. And you can find more information at joyoftroy.org. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Like,
Hey, you.
to hold, even like a tiny weight.